Okay, welcome to the next segment. Brian says, um, today we're going to discuss Kevin Sagiao, Sagiao. He was a man in prison who obviously is not an innocent man, but IDOC killed him. So, how do we know that this is what happened? Well, let me go back to when I first started at IDOC. Back in 2015, when I began, I obviously knew nothing about IDOC other than I was excited about the job. I thought this was a great opportunity and I was going to be able to help people come back into society and be contributing to, a better place. I was there for a very short period until I met Mr. Sagallo. He came on my caseload, a really nice guy. Didn't have any issues with him. He stayed out of trouble in the tier. There are no issues. Um, then, as time goes by, um, and I'm there for less than 6 months at this point, I start noticing things about this gentleman. I noticed that before, where he's very active, he's going and playing sports outside. Looks like he's having a good time. Like I said, he's staying out of trouble. It's not an issue for management or security. He's obviously not well. I am not a medical doctor, but I do know a few things. I do know what sickness and illness looks like, and especially something that's chronic. Um, Over time, I started noticing his eyes were starting to get yellow, and at a certain point, I was like, Mr. Sagallo, what is going on with you? When I first met you, you were healthy, no issues, and now, right before my eyes, something's happening. He's like, Mr. McClure, I'm dying. I'm like, what? It blew my mind. I could not understand what was happening. So I started working on what's called medical parole for this guy. That would be something if somebody's dying in prison. That's the last thing you want to do. That's not compassionate. That's inhumane. All of those different words. And I was concerned about this guy because, like I said, he was in there, if I recall, for drugs. Um, Now, was he innocent? Like I said, he's not an innocent man. He was in there for a few reasons, and he'd been in there for a while. So, what did he contract, either in prison or before? He contracted hepatitis C. So, if anybody knows about Hep-C, it is treatable. And back in 2015, we had the cure. So there's a thing when it comes to medical care called chronic care. And so basically, all that means is that your health is monitored carefully to make sure that things don't start going bad. So, in the case like things for Mr. Sagallo, very bottom line, he should have been having his liver enzymes monitored and his blood work done about once every 4 weeks or so, maybe more, depending on, outward signs, health, that sort of thing. Well, if a layman is randomly seeing somebody who's on his caseload who isn't a high priority and noticing from the outside that there's an issue, that is a problem. And so, again, I'm with IDOC at this point less than 6 months. And I'm noticing this guy literally die right before my eyes. And I start asking questions. Um, I get an evaluation in my evaluation because in order to keep my job, I have to pass a 6 month evaluation. And on my 6 month evaluation, it talks about basically how I'm not staying in my lane and I'm causing a few issues. It was a minor blip, but it kind of gave me a little insight to what was to come. But bottom line, I started asking questions. I'm like, what's going on with this guy? Why aren't we treating him? Et cetera, et cetera. And nobody would talk to me. Well, again, it's embarrassing and it's extremely unfortunate. And this should never have happened. And I know this today. If I would have pushed even stronger, they would have fired me in my first 6 months because we had the cure. IDOC determined that Mr. Sagallo was not worth providing that cure and they allowed him to die. So, as I was working on a medical parole to get him out before he got too sick, it turns out that um, medical was also doing a parole, but they would not talk to me. Case managers, which is my position, were very low on the totem pole. In fact, they're always low on the totem pole. If you say anything, you're looked at with suspicion and often treated very poorly if you're speaking out about somebody's health, somebody's safety. In fact, that's going to become more apparent as these segments continue. I'll elaborate more on those things too. So, as I did that, I continued to watch Mr. Sagayo's health decline, and it declined rapidly. Until one day he was out on the tier, and I was there that day, and he was bleeding from all of his orifices. So he could no longer breathe. They intubated him, and all of a sudden, the medical parole that I had been working on suddenly got granted, like immediately. Somebody made a phone call. I believe it was Jay, somebody who was one of the wardens there. Real fine piece of work there. And he made something happen and then called me and said I needed to get his housing approved like now. And that's not how things normally work. Usually takes a couple of weeks. Well, what that was going on, they did not want him to die in prison. And that's exactly what he did. He died in prison. Did they grant the medical parole? You bet they did. But he died within hours, and they artificially kept him alive so his family would be able to come and see him, which is the very definition of inhumane. So not only did they keep him alive artificially for multiple days, they refused to provide him with the treatment to Hep-C. And while I was working to try to, get him seen, nobody would talk to me. Okay, so this is murder, right? And you may be asking, well, Brian, when did you actually report it as a murder? Well, not until recently. I reported it to Idaho State Police that this gentleman had been murdered by IDOC. I gave them the information that I had, and they pretty much blew me off. I also reported it to the FBI that they knew that he was sick for a long time. They were not providing chronic care intentionally. If they were, they would have been monitoring all those different things. Um, Basically, the FBI said, well, it's just incompetence. I'm like, it's only incompetent if it's not on purpose. And deliberate incompetence is totally a different thing, and that is illegal. You can't deliberately say you're just incompetent. Sorry for the finger quotes. But that's ridiculous. So I reported it. I reported it. Idaho State Police refused to talk to me. First time I called, I gave them the information. They never called me back. I called again. They basically were refusing to take my phone call until I pressed and I finally got somebody on the phone. And he treated me like I was the problem. So I wrote an email basically saying, laying out all the things that I had because it would be really easy to go back. Did IDOC check his blood? Did they check his heart? Did they check his vital organs? Or did they know he had Hep-C the whole time, which they knew, and they purposely refused to treat it and let him die? It's one or the other. You either knew what was going on, you took care of it, and there's no incompetence there. That is exactly what it is. They allowed him to die. It's not the first person to die within the care of IDOC, and nor will it be the last. So, not only did I report it to the FBI, Idaho State Police, I also contacted the senators and representatives here within the capital of the state of Idaho, and I have gotten back exactly zero responses of any merit. So I will continue to move forward on this. He's not the first one to die. He's not the last. Um, let's see. I think I'm going to conclude with this segment for Mr. Sagiao. He deserves a lot more. I've tried to find his family so I could gather more information about who he was. When I was doing some research about his charges, I saw he had some arrests where he got tied up with a judge's daughter, it appears, or somebody within the judge's family, which didn't go well because obviously, um, how's that? How do you recover from that? The judge eventually recused himself because he knew Mr. Sagiao, but this is what was going on. Um, so I hope to have a follow up on Mr. Sagiao, but we'll see. So for my second part of the segment, I know I talk a lot about how Idaho is very red, racist, and unforgiving for anybody who's different. Um, in a lot of ways, the state of Idaho is the canary in a coal mine, so to speak, for the whole country because we are so red. They are so, um, what's the right word? Um, oh, there's a word. They bow to the ring of Trump and all the extremists. Hard right would be another term. We have three percenters and oath keepers walking the halls of our capital. Yes, that is how bad it is. And they're helping create new laws so they can break and make our streets less safe in Idaho. Great. Good job, elected officials. And Brad Little, he's not doing a thing or saying a word because he's fearful. He doesn't want to not be elected. He wants to be elected again. So on that note, there was a recent ruling in Texas. And one thing that Idaho tries very hard to be is very much like Texas for whatever reason. So there in Texas, there's a student whose hair got him suspended from school, and the judge ruled that that is okay. Wow. You know, I've spent a lot of time in school. I have never been intimidated, threatened, harassed, or anything by anybody's hair. The only time I can think of a hair actually being an issue is when it was on fire and attacking me. Oh, wait, that's never happened. So, if you want to know just how racist Idaho is going to be soon, that's where we're going. And it's very unfortunate, obviously. Um, Next week's segment, I'll start breaking into a little bit of how I was terminated. I'll start with the first thing that happened around 2020 when I started speaking out and trying to keep not just myself safe during COVID 19, but also the staff and the public, and what the response was by my leadership. It's an interesting ride. All right. Stay safe out there. This is Brian Says. Have a great day. Thanks.